Welcome back to the Versatile PC channel. Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that PC builders, especially first-time builders, overspend money on. And this isn't going to be talking about shaming people for spending money on like a 4090 when they don't really need it and they play like, you know, Smash Brother emulators or they play Pac-Man or something. They don't need a 4090 and a 9800 X3D, but they spent the money on it. We're not talking about performance shaming or anything like that. We're more just talking about like overspecking certain components or like overspending on certain components because of certain features or stuff like that. So first up, I would start with when it comes to cooling. I think this is probably the number one thing that people spend too much money on is cooling. And that is like things like trying to buy, AIOs that are way too over spec as far as sizes, a 360. Let's say you only need a 240, and let's say you want to go to an AIO, or you buy an AIO that's 200 or something US dollars that has, LCD screen on the pump head, and you don't need it. It's like you don't need that stuff. RGB, you could overspend on RGB, you can overspec on other things. But for most gamers, you don't need the LCD screen. You don't even really use it much. You don't look at it much. You're too busy focused on your monitor. You're not sitting there staring at your screen. Enthusiast level though, yeah, the screens are nice because if you like looking at your temperatures or looking at a cool GIF or GIF, whatever they're called, whatever you want to call them. The other thing people spend much money on, this is just me cooling in general, is like fans. So these Aorus fans, yes, they have less wires, but these are also like $50 or something, $60 for a pack of 3. When there's fans on Amazon that have lighting, and these are not ARGB, but there's ones that are ARGB that are like $12 for 3. Yeah, the wiring isn't as nice, but they perform about the same. It might be a little bit louder, but these have magnetic connection. They don't have many wires. They only have 2 wires, and then you could start somewhere in between, like from a $12 fan for 3 versus like a $17, $30 or $20 something fan. You can buy like this Montech kit right here, the AX120s, for $40 with 3, and they have a fan hub. So if you want to have less wires to your motherboard, or don't want to worry about daisy chaining, this one has a hub. So you can just buy a third-party hub for like a couple bucks, and just plug all your fans and stuff into that, all your RGB into there, and then just have one connection for your motherboard, for your PWM fan, and for your RGB. You don't have to go through and buy the Lian Li Uni fans. You don't have to buy, the Corsair LCD screened, AIOs. You can pick up good performing parts that don't have those, feature sets that you don't really use often. A lot of times, a lot of times, you can get away with, instead of going AIO, you can get away with just a budget air cooler. These are $30, $35 with RGB. There's other cheaper options. You can go tower cooler like this one, or you go like a flat cooler. There's other options. Thermalright Peerless Assassin's a great option. Usually around like $30 sometimes. The other thing too is going over spec as far as cooling goes. That's I think one of the biggest things people spend a lot of money on. Another thing people spend a lot of money on, and I don't think they need to, is your motherboard. Now, this one isn't the cheapest of motherboards. It's also not super expensive. You can go, for most gamers, a B650 or a B series motherboard when it comes to AMD, or a Z series motherboard for Intel is plenty for you for gaming. As long as it comes with, just have a good picture on the side. Oh, it does not. On the back here it does. As long as it has enough USB connection for you, and the VRM is good enough for your CPU you're putting in there, that's all you really need to worry about. There are some features you can get that are nice, but most gamers, they're not building your PC multiple times, so you don't need removable M.2 covers that are toolless. You don't need the fancy buttons. You don't need super fast rear I/O panel stuff. Like most keyboard mice only support USB 3.0 anyway. You don't need a bunch of 5.0 ports. But I would say you at least need to find a motherboard with probably at least 5, USB 3.0 ports is probably a good idea, just for a little bit of future expandability. But, and use case is different. But you gotta make sure that's the one thing about with your motherboard is one, make sure it is auto overclockable because most of the your RAM when you buy that is designed to be overclocked, and make sure that it has enough rear I/O for you to connect your keyboard, your mouse, your controller, camera, microphone, whatever you're gonna connect. Make sure it has enough rear I/O for that. You can always use your case USB ports as well, but most of that stuff people just plug right into their motherboards. Another thing people spend a lot of money on, and that is their not the performance of their graphics card, is more of the name of like the above MSRP cards, the AIB cards. So for a little bit of performance, so this right here is an Intel RP 580, set to be a $250 card at MSRP. This particular model is the Sparkle, the Sparkle Titan, which was $300 US. So an extra $50 just for the AIB card. When you can buy, which technically you can't actually buy at MSRP, I know, but if you could buy them at MSRP, $250 versus $300, that's quite a big difference at a budget tier. That's an extra $50 if you're spending if you're trying to build a super low end or low budget PC. $50 is a lot of money. And this right here, which is it's a 700G, it's not a 9070 or anything, but this is the Power Color Red Devil, which is one of their higher end models. When the normal Power Color like Hellhound or the Power Color, I think Reaper is what their other ones are, they're more closer to MSRP cards, perform about the same within a few percentage difference of this. But that's another thing people spend too much money on is the above MSRP AIB cards. So you don't need to go crazy. They don't perform that much of a difference. You won't really notice the performance difference. You'll mainly notice the price difference. And then this is right here, a 4070 Ti Super. There are some models that are over $100 more than this MSRP of these cards were. And this is the MSRP card. It looks fine. It doesn't have anything fancy, but it looks good. I mean, like, it's just all black. I mean, that's what most GPUs are anyway. So as long as the cooler is good enough, and as long as it's, I say close to MSRP, then yeah, pick them up. But for over-pecking it, that's, I think, too much. Like having too high above it just to buy a brand or just to buy a tier, I think that's too much. So that's one where people spend a lot of money at is the over MSRP AIB cards. Another thing people spend a lot of money on is their case. Your computer case only has to be good. Only has to do three things, right? One, fit the components in it. Two, have good airflow and good ability to support cooling. So you don't want a bunch of glass panels, but you want mesh panels. You can have some glass, mostly mesh panels, to get airflow in and out of the case. And it needs to fit in your room. That's all it has to do. And yeah, aesthetics are one thing. It has to look kind of appealing, but you don't need an OLED dynamic. You don't need a dual chamber case. You don't need a fish tank case. You don't need a super crazy case. You can get away with a super budget case that comes pre-installed with some fans, so you don't have to buy your extra fans. You wouldn't have to even buy these extra fans if it came pre-installed with fans. Some great honorable mentions for budget gamers: the Montech Air 903 Max, the Okinos cases, a lot of times available, or like Newegg and Amazon. There's a Montech, a couple other Montech cases like the Air 100. Yeah, any kind of budget case that comes pre-installed with fans, that's a good option for budget people. For people in the budget category, they don't have to buy extra fans. So yeah, on to the next thing people spend a lot of money on, and it's going to be storage. Now, I'm not going to say capacity is a problem, but some people do, I think, overspec their capacity when trying to limit their budget. This is something that I wouldn't prioritize. I would at least prioritize a 1 terabyte SSD, but Gen 4 is plenty fast enough, which is funny because this Gen 4 drive is slower, but actually more expensive than this Micro Center in-house brand one because it is Western Digital. But this inline one, 1 terabyte, 200 megabytes per second, which is plenty fast for gaming. This I got for like $63 or something. So for 1 terabyte, $60, you don't need to go crazy. I mean, if I have to expand in the future, I can, but I don't think I need to. So But if you're gonna spend $120 on like a Samsung Drive, a 2 terabyte, that's too much. When you could, you could have bought maybe a better GPU or better CPU and got more performance now, and then in the future add your extra drives. That's all you gotta really do is just how I would, in order of specing my parts. That was 1, 2, everything. That's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 5. Right? Yeah. Okay. So another thing that people spend a lot of money on, this on an honorable mention, kind of a sixth one, is the brand of parts that you're buying. You don't need to buy the highest end brand. You don't need to buy all themed brand of stuff. It does make it a little bit nicer when connecting RGB softwares and stuff to have everything matching as far as your brands and all your fans and everything, and your motherboard to all show up like on their software. But again, you don't need everything to be the same brand, or you don't have to buy the highest end brand. You don't need everything to be Asus. Gigabyte makes plenty of good products. MSI makes some good products. Lian Li makes good products, but they're a little bit higher end. ASRock makes some pretty decent products. So you don't need everything to be all one brand. You don't need to be the highest end brand. You don't need the ROG PC build, especially when you're trying not to overspend on your PC. But yeah, how I would kind of spec my parts if I were to build a new build or even a used build, whatever you're going with, I would prioritize buying the fastest GPU you can afford. So I would dedicate about half your budget, 45% to half of your budget, to 50% of your budget dedicated to your graphics card. And then I would buy a CPU fast enough that's not going to bottleneck that, which is usually about, I think it's about 25% of your graphics card amount in the current market. Now I know prices change daily; they go up and down. They're different, but like about 25%. Always do some research about it. Pretty easy to find CPUs and GPUs that aren't going to bottleneck each other. And then I would buy the rest of my components. I would buy. Next, you have to buy your motherboard because your CPU you're going with is limited to what motherboard you have to use. And then from there, then I would buy my cooler. I'm building a high-end Intel CPU, like a 14th or 13th gen. An air cooler like this probably isn't going to work. You're going to step up probably to an AIO, a 240 or a 360. So that kind of dictates how much you spend there. And then from there, you decide, okay, I don't have enough. Then you have to buy a case that'll fill your components and your power supply. There's another thing too, people spend a lot of money on is power supplies, over-speccing them. But don't go with 1,000 watt. You just buy something that you need for your budget. And then you buy a case that's going to fit all your components. And then you go, okay, I have enough room left in my budget for a 1 terabyte, or I have enough room left in my budget for 2 terabytes. So that's things you can always upgrade later is these. And you'll never necessarily lose the use of your old one, because most motherboards come with multiple expansion slots for M.2s. Or you can buy a PCIe expansion slot for M.2s as well. So that's the order I would spec it. So I'd spec it with my GPU, then my CPU, and then the motherboard, and then the cooling for the CPU cooler. And then I would do my case to make sure all my components are going to fit. Power supply, and then I would do my case to make sure all your components are going to fit in there. And then I would worry about storage. I'd definitely go with the M.2 no matter what, even if you have to go 500 gigs off the start and then upgrade later. I would definitely prioritize it in that order just to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck and best performance, because you're not going to notice what kind of CPU cooler you have unless you're at TJ Maxx, but you will notice how many frames you get in a game if you're getting between 60 FPS to 200 FPS. There's going to be a big difference, but you wouldn't have that big of a jump anyway. In your budget, you wouldn't have a big discrepancy there, but just say that's where you would spend a lot of money at. All right. If you guys like this video, if you guys have anything else you think people overspend money on, leave it in the comments below. If you have any other future video ideas, things you want to see, leave those in the comments below as well. If you like this video, make sure you leave a like. If you want to find yourself back for more content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We will be hopefully posting at least once a week from here on out. I gotta film a lot of videos today, so you'll see this fly outfit a lot today. I'm gonna film like 4 videos, I think, 4 maybe even 5. So I gotta start working on the next one. All right, thanks.